Hello guys, Brad here again with another fragrance video. Today I want to do a video called Top 10 Things My Fragrance Journey Has Taught Me. Now, I thought this would be a fun little concept here. Let's suppose that when you first started out your fragrance journey, somehow your future current self could come back in time and tell you uh, how to do this hobby properly. Because I think we've all done regretful things within the hobby over the years, especially if you've been in the fragrance hobby for as long as I have. And so I came up with 10 concepts, ideas that I think I would probably tell myself to try to keep me well guided and informed on my hobby for the long haul. And here's my list here. Number 10, expensive fragrances aren't necessarily better than cheaper fragrances. Now, whenever you buy a house or a car or even most appliances, usually you get what you pay for. $200 item is usually better than a $20 item. But in the fragrance world, I find that this isn't always the case. Sometimes you're paying for presentation, or maybe just because shortage of supply or whatever doesn't necessarily mean you're getting a better product. Sometimes projection longevity isn't as good. Sometimes the smell isn't as good. So, you can't, just assume that if you go out and buy, 100, 200, and $300 fragrances that you're going to be set. Sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes if you just stick with the $20, $30 fragrances, you'll have a better collection than the guy that has the $200 and $300 fragrances. So you just got to know your taste and go with that. Don't just go by price tag. So that's number 10. Number 9, only trust your nose. Everybody's nose is a little bit different. I think every fragrance reviewer, every member of the fragrance community's nose is almost like a snowflake. Everybody, just kind of sees and perceives everything a little bit differently. And, you got to go with that. Some people like, vintage smelling fragrances, unisex, citrusy, woody. There's so many different things that people can like with their fragrances. So just know your taste and always try to smell it first and make your own opinion before you make a drastic decision about buying something. Number 8, and this is pretty much in the same vein as number 9, blind buying is very risky. I've blind bought many fragrances over the years. Some of those fragrances I threw in the trash. Some of them have kind of gravitated towards the back of my fragrance shelf. On very rare occasions, I would say maybe like 5, 10% of the time, I did, make a nice purchase with a blind buy. But I found that over the years, blind buying hasn't paid off for me. Probably would have been better off going a different way, maybe getting samples or whatnot. Of course, back in those days, you didn't have all these people on Facebook selling decants and samples. You pretty much had to just take a risk to get a chance to smell something sometimes, because the community has certainly changed. But definitely say that knowing how risky blind buying is may have made it less appealing at the time. Sometimes you think that it's a 50-50 shot or maybe a 70-30 shot, but really it's probably more like a 20-80 shot, blind buying, especially if you're blind buying something that no one's ever really heard of before, like one of these obscure fragrance brands or whatever. So keep that in mind. Blind buying is very risky. Number 7, backup bottles are probably not necessary. You'll see people go out and buy 3 or 4 backup bottles of a fragrance that they think is being discontinued or reformulated because they couldn't stand the idea of not having that fragrance in their collection. But as you grow in this fragrance journey, you realize that a 3.3 ounce bottle of fragrance is probably going to last you a lifetime anyway. If you're a signature scent type person, you're probably not on a fragrance journey to begin with. You probably rotate your fragrances so heavily that a 3 ounce bottle is going to last you 20, 30 years. So why, buy all these backups? Now, some people might try to resell these backups when they're, worth 10 times their purchase price. And if that's the case, if you're a seller or have an eBay store or something like that, maybe buying backups is good for that. But just for your own personal use, Probably not a wise investment. Number 6, the fragrance community would rather be entertained than informed. Now, this is maybe one of my more controversial statements, but I've noticed that there's a lot of very knowledgeable and well, you know, trained noses out there that aren't really getting their due recognition on YouTube, and people that just have the fancy uh, setups and everything. The people, I guess the slick production values, they're the ones getting all the views. People with the, like maybe the weird sense of humor sometimes, or just something about their channel just makes them very appealing. Uh, in my opinion, a lot of these reviewers aren't really, the best in their ability to describe a fragrance or market a fragrance, but they're getting all the views. And the ones that really seem to know what they're talking about, they get overlooked sometimes because their presentation is bland and boring. So that's one thing I found out. So sometimes you can't really go by the number of subscribers that a person has to pick a good reviewer. Sometimes you just gotta know who the person is and follow their channel a little bit and make your own decisions in that regard. So maybe I'm just being a little bit better because my channel is kind of gravitating around 1,600 subs, and maybe I think, well, gee, people out there, should be subscribing to me when they're not, but they don't. But to each their own. Number 5, the search for the perfect fragrance will never end. And a good story for that, I remember one time somebody sent me a decant of Frappan's The Human East, and I was really blown away by that fragrance. I actually went out and bought the whole bottle of it, and I thought, now I got the perfect summer fragrance. I can stop now. I got what I need. This is where it all ends. But no, I kept watching YouTube videos, and more fragrances were being brought to my attention. I continued to buy the samples and decants and bottles of those fragrances. The journey never ends. So as long as you continue to watch fragrance videos on YouTube, as long as you can continue to follow the Facebook groups, you're going to always be in search of that perfect fragrance. Number 4, full-size bottles are great for videos and presentation purposes, but for my fragrance needs, samples and decants are best. I have a tendency to use a lot of decants and samples. Like today, for example, I finished off a sample of Calvin Klein's Eternity. And at work lately, I've been wearing my decant of Pacific Rock Moss. My bottles, even though I have a lot of bottles, I don't really reach for them very often. I think, when you do the video review, you like to have the bottle and the box, the full presentation, because people are going to tend to watch those videos more than the sample only type videos. But after the video's over, what do I reach for? My decants and my samples. Those are my bread and butter for my fragrance needs. For some reason, my bottles don't really get touched as often. I think maybe one of the reasons for that is because I like to finish off my samples and decants before I buy more. I know it's going to take me years to finish off a bottle. It might only take me a few days to finish off a sample. So as long as I'm throwing stuff away, I can buy more and not feel too guilty about that. So that's something that I always do more so than bottles is my samples and decants. Number 3, not all women will like the same fragrance. And a lot of us, will hear a woman on YouTube, either as a guest or has her own channel, she'll recommend a couple of fragrances, and we'll have to go out and buy, Pacific Rock Moss or whatever the women are liking. And then maybe you buy it, and you find out maybe the woman that you're in a relationship with doesn't really like it. Guess what? All women are different, just like all guys are different. You can't say, well, this woman likes that fragrance, so that woman's going to like that fragrance. Everybody's taste is different. So don't think just because one girl said that's the greatest thing I've ever smelled, it's necessarily the greatest thing there is. 2 different statements. And number 2, there will always be a fragrance that gets hyped and then forgotten. If you go back over the years, you can almost make like a glossary of fragrances that were hyped during any specific year. Maybe it was Versace's The Dreamer, Muscat Azure, Pure Malt. Every year, a new fragrance gets hyped. 2 or 3 months later, people kind of forget about it. They sell it off, get rid of it, start a new hype train, blah, 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 goes on and on. So, you know, if you think, you know, buying the hype train fragrance is gonna fulfill your needs, well, guess what? 6 months later, a new train will be started and a new craze will be started, and then you'll have to start over again. Anyway, and number one, most reviewers don't share my taste in fragrances, and this is something that I've known for a while. But for some reason, I'm watching all these fragrance reviewers, and hardly any of them seem to like the same fragrances I do, which is fine. Maybe I'm just sort of an outcast or just have my own special taste in fragrances. I don't really like the unisex fragrances too much. I don't like the daring fragrances too much. The animalic fragrances too much. I like my generic, mainstream, mass appealing fragrances. And unfortunately, not too many reviewers are talking about those types of fragrances anymore. Everybody's going off with the indies and the clone houses, and even these new releases a lot of times are not doing it for me. So that's my list. 10 things I would try to tell myself if I could go back in time and try to set me straight on my fragrance journey as I proceed into the future. So thanks again for watching, guys, and I will talk to you later.